Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is the people first approach to funding the future of logistics with my friend Michael Sahai. How's it going, Michael?
Doing great. Really appreciate you taking the time to have me on the show today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversations. Michael, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Absolutely. So my name is Michael Sahai. I'm partner at HPA. We're an early stage tech investment group based in Chicago. And really about us, what we've been building. So I joined the firm as the first full-time hire about 12 years ago. And what HPA's focus has been on is to really to take a different approach to early stage investing. And so what we've done is we've created a network of operators. So these are individuals with very deep domain expertise who've grown, scaled, and exited companies. And we've been able to leverage these individuals to not just be a source of capital or not just a source of financial capital, but really a source of human capital as well. And so as we've partnered and working with different startups to bring innovation to the supply chain and a variety of other sectors, have been able to really provide that lens of folks who've been there and done that before to help our companies navigate the challenges that come when launching an early stage business.
I like it. I like it. So you guys are a venture capital firm and you very much take a people first approach, which I appreciate. What's the difference between a venture capitalist and a private equity guy?
Yeah, absolutely. The big difference is really in terms of the stage and goals of the outcomes of a company. And so, on the venture capital side of things, especially at the stage that we invest in, we're really focused on finding founders at the earliest points as they're starting to go to market and really starting to develop their product. And so, for us, we're taking what's considered an early stage bet to see if these companies can really become the next generation of leaders in their industry. On the private equity side, it's a bit different. So these are usually more established businesses. At that point, you're talking about EBITDA and significant revenue. And the goal of a private equity is to take a majority position in the company and really try to position it for optimized revenue growth. And usually those are more established businesses. And the role of a private equity is much more really owning the business almost to a point, versus on the venture capital side, we're much more partners and really supporting the founders to get to the outcome that we're all looking for.
And so if I was to think about the logistics, transportation, warehousing space, venture capital guys like you will make investments in kind of the new businesses, typically tech business and stuff that can scale like hockey stick growth, right? But there's other very successful companies that are growing via private equity where they might say, hey, we bought up 5 different warehousing companies across the nation, and we're consolidating and building a network of warehouses. It's not hockey stick growth. There's nothing wrong with it. One's not right, one's not wrong, but they just have very different focuses. Venture capital, you expect big growth, and you sometimes know that the strikeouts are going to happen. In private equity, I don't think they're ever expecting any strikeouts. They do a lot of the due diligence. And they said, this company's been making money for years. We want that to continue.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's definitely a very different risk profile for sure. For us at these earliest stages, you don't even know if there's a customer willing to pay for the product versus at the point of a private equity business, you probably have had longstanding relationships with many of your customers for a long period of time. And the role of the private equity is to provide that optimization of operations versus for us, it's to find new innovations in that category. But yeah, to your point, Joe, it's both are very necessary for a variety of industries, especially in the supply chain.
Yep. So you guys are very much an early stage VC. Please talk about the difference between an early stage VC and kind of the guys who specialize in the later stages.
Absolutely. So we invest what's called in the seed and series A categories. And the distinctions between those is that the pre-seed, it's really companies that are just getting started. They may have a couple lines of code written. They may have really identified what their business model and business focus is, but really don't have much in the sense of revenue or even a fully developed product. At the seed stage, it's once they're further along, probably have a couple contracts, some revenue in the door, and a clearer line of sight that, hey, this is a solution that people are willing to pay for. And at the point of the Series A, it's a bit further along, usually a company doing $1 to $2 million in revenue that has really started to demonstrate that there is a product market fit, that the solution that the company has built, there's clearly customers and many customers that are going to be willing to pay for it. And so those are like the early stages of when we get involved versus some of the larger funds or funds that are focused on later stages. They're focusing on companies that may be a year or two away from going public. And at that point, the company's probably doing hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, and has just a much stronger position of like, how do I grow year over year? But it's no longer a baseline question of will anybody buy the solution? And so for us at the stage that we invest in, we very much think about the value proposition because given the early stage of what we invest in, there's a big question of behavior change. There's a big question of are people willing to do it? And if you think about that across a variety of different industries, some of the most well known startups in the last 10 years, something like an Airbnb, nobody really knew if they'd be willing to live in someone else's home, or an Uber going into a stranger's car. And if you're an investor at the pre-seed and seed stage, you're still just figuring out if there's a willingness in the market to do that versus if you're a later stage and a year or two before Uber goes public, it's a very different perspective at that point because you already understand the baseline of the business question.
So the advantage for you guys as a early stage is that you get a bigger bite. So if I say, "Hey, I've just got this little business and I want to get some funding on this," you guys say, "Hey, this we're going to get a little larger chunk of the business, and if it does become successful, you do really well." But you also take the risk that not all of them are going to be home runs or even singles.
Yeah, absolutely. And our business model is certainly predicated on the fact that there will be companies that unfortunately go to zero. And to your point, on the private equity side, there's essentially no risk of it going to zero as where it's baked in. But no, and I think that's the part that's really exciting. And so when you talk about taking the bigger chunk, it's all really
It's
valuation based.
justified. It's just
Yeah, it's justified, but it's really comes down to a question of valuation. And really the way that we think about valuation and try to help our companies think about it as well is that valuation is a representation of risk. And so in that same example, if you're trying to prove out that there's even a market for what you're doing, there's a lot more risk at that point than someone who's doing tens of millions of dollars in revenue.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I've interviewed a number of venture capital guys over the years, and what I've come to realize is that you got to you got to pick those guys the right way. So there's a lot of people who might pitch to say, "Hey, invest in us," but they're not all the right fit because they're not necessarily in your space. But also, you're going to be joined at the hip with these guys. They're the you get the right VC, and they're going to make introductions. They're going to have other portfolio companies that can help you. They're going to have much more than just a check. And I think, today's topic, again, people first approach to funding the future of logistics. I think that speaks to, you guys say that's your brand, is we want to work with people and we also happen to be people. So we think it should work out. So please talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the big things that we've been very diligent as we've built up our firm over the past 12 years and more has been really in bringing together those initial operators that make up the source of capital and support. We've been very kind of diligent, similar to the efforts that's taken of seeing if there's a good fit with a potential founder from an investment perspective. We've taken those same steps to ensure that the folks we have around the table are aligned in terms of understanding the risk associated in investing in early companies, making sure that they have their own domain expertise that'll be valuable to these startups, and then making sure there's the right capital components to it. And when we think about our people first approach, it really does come down to once you have that perfect match of folks internally within our organization, then we're out there in the market meeting with thousands of startups to find the small handful where there is that kind of alignment of vision, alignment of us being able to create value for those companies. And then us being deeply aligned with the founders that the vision of what they want to take to market is something that we think is possible as well. And those combination of things has really been a very powerful kind of focus for us. And I think as different VCs, as the venture capital ecosystem has evolved, one of the things that we've seen, especially over the last 5 years, is there's more and more VC firms that are taking an industry specific lens towards their investing. And so instead of investing across many categories, focusing on a handful where they have that kind of deeper perspective on the market and deeper competitive component. And we've been able to do that, and we've done that specifically through our people first model and through those individuals who've built businesses for 20, 30, 40 years in a particular category, to then be able to take that expertise and take that network and take that strategic outlook to help the next generation of founders.
I love it. I love it. So I know we'll get into more detail about this, but I was looking at some of the portfolio companies you've working with, I should say. Better Trucks, Four Kites, ShipBob, Pacurate, Digit Software. a lot of names we recognize in our space. They weren't always big companies. Anyway, before we get into all of that, tell us a little bit about you, Michael. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined as the first employee over at HPA.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. So yeah, in terms of my personal background, so I'm a first generation Polish immigrant. My parents specifically immigrated from Poland in their 20s, and that really shaped my perspective and view on the world. And specifically, my father works for kind of a large American manufacturer of hand tools within the electrical supply space. And so for my entire life, grew up with just a deeper appreciation for the manufacturing sector and a deeper appreciation for building things with your own hands. I always joke when I was a kid, I would always have the best science fair projects. Everybody else's stuff was made out of cardboard or things of that sort. I would come with welded metal products. That's because my dad was able to help me with it. And fast forward, as I continued to grow and develop in my own career, ended up going to Northwestern University. I was actually part of a full ride scholarship there through a program called Evan Scholars, which is specifically catered towards caddies. And so I spent my entire kind of high
Oh, I
school.
was a caddy, and I remember that Evans scholarship. I remember that. Just like Caddyshack. I didn't get the scholarship, but I was a
The
caddy.
Caddyshack movie is actually is closely related and connected to that kind of
Yeah,
the
Bill
whole
Murray's
concept.
from Chicagoland.
Yeah, that program really shaped so many opportunities for me and have so many fond memories and connections from there. But so it was part of the Evan Scholars program while I was at Northwestern. And Northwestern was my certainly first foray into a variety of things within the startup ecosystem. But at the time that I was going to school, it was still relatively nascent in terms of it was still at a period of time where being a founder meant you didn't have a job versus
Yes.
what it means now, which there's just a lot of enthusiasm around startup founders. But leverage and took in was part of a couple of startups myself while I was at Northwestern. But coming out of school, really wanted some foundational kind of skill sets, and I actually moved from Chicago over to Washington D.C. and specifically worked for Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a large consulting firm primarily focused on the kind of government side of things. And so I spent about 3 years working in the Department of Defense, working inside the Pentagon, focused on kind of operations, focusing on process improvements, and really just understanding how things worked on the back end to get products and solutions to market. And one of the fun things about the Pentagon that folks may not always realize is that certainly Google and others embrace the idea of live and work in the same place, like having all of these kind of amenities. The Department of Defense and specifically the Pentagon actually started that well before even Google because of all the security restrictions and making sure who comes in and out. The Pentagon itself is like an entire city. And so there's multiple Starbucks, there's subways.
I think it's the largest building in the world, I think.
It is, yeah. It's the largest building, and then the second largest by square feet is the Merchandise Mart in my hometown of Chicago, which is where I moved to after Booz Allen. And so I went from the second largest to our first largest to the second largest.
So Chrysler always says their building, the Chrysler Technical Center in Auburn Hills, is the largest building. I don't know. When you get to the size of Merchandise Mart or the Pentagon or CTC, you walk all day to get to go across that place.
You do,
It's like
yeah.
oh, I got a meeting down here. You're like, that's like a half hour from here. Like,
It is. The one thing that Pentagon did well was actually you can get to any part in the Pentagon using escalators. So you didn't have to go through stairs or didn't have to go through elevators. And so I optimized the walking routes and actually used it to have meetings to get to and from places.
it's a sad memory, but on 9/11, I remember I was at Chrysler. I was in a meeting and I remember them saying, hey, there's this plane hit this tower. And then they said, maybe an hour later, we was all still working because we didn't really know the extent of it. But then they said, hey, this is an iconic building. Go home. So we all had to leave. And yeah, anyway, glad we're out of that. So you joined HPA. How did that come about? I know you're the first employee. So how did
Yeah,
that
yeah,
happen?
absolutely. So I was always very interested since high school and college in the startup sector. And so after 3 years at Booz Allen Hamilton, started looking for what was next and really also wanted to go back to my hometown of Chicago. And so started looking and interviewing for at a variety of different startups and different kind of VC groups and came across HBA because actually one of my best friends from college got backed by HBA. And as they were looking to continue to grow their organization, I decided that bringing on somebody in a true kind of full time capacity was going to be an important step. And so, yeah, interviewed and was excited to get the job there. And it was interesting because as I was leaving Booz Allen Hamilton, I was very excited and telling my colleagues and telling the partners of the firm how excited I was to be in the venture space and to be taking on this kind of role as the first full time hire in an up and coming firm. And one of the partners at Booz Allen said, "When it fails, you're welcome to come back."
I always say those kind of companies, Booz Allen, I'm sure says this, those kind of consulting companies, they say we're known for by our alumni. And I remember a friend worked at one of those type of firms, and he said every year we would have a big party for our alumni. It'd be near Christmas, and he said we'd have tons of business that came from, I used to work there for a few years right out of college. They treated me like $1 million, and now I get to come back. And they said it was a great source of networking and business.
It is. They've done a great job, as well as many other consulting firms, of really retaining and engaging their alumni. When I heard that from the partner at the time that I was leaving, I had never even expected that HBA could fail because I just came from a big company that the idea of failure wasn't Booz Allen is too big to fail almost from that perspective. And so it was certainly an eye-opening kind of before I had even started, like realizing the challenges of what startups go through and venture firms in their own right. And just fast forward to your point about kind of the alumni side of consulting firms, Booz Allen Hamilton since then, over the last couple of years, now has their own venture arm. And so that's one of our collaborators and folks, and they're very much focused on defense tech and broader supply chain elements as well. And it's been fun to see some of that past coming back into this new world of venture capital as well.
Yep. And I think you mentioned defense. And I think when we talk about the supply chain realignment that's happening right now with the trade and the tariff changes, I think part of the thinking on this is a lot of the stuff that we have overseas might be strategic that has to come home. I don't think we necessarily need to make every t-shirt here, but if you can't make cars and trucks and tanks and planes, you're at risk. And so I feel like supply chain, which by the way, the supply chain was born and raised here in the Midwest, Michigan, Chicago, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and it's still the huge manufacturing hub for the world is what we call the Rust Belt. We might have lost quite a bit, but we still are probably the top manufacturer. I know people would say China for sure. They're a great manufacturer. If we're not number one, we'd be number two to that region. But
For sure.
anyway, enough of my blather. Let's talk about some of these topics. I had written down 4 topics I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about warehouse automation, cold chain, supply chain and CPG stuff. And then last but not least, what you're looking for in companies that you can invest in. So first, let's talk about warehouse automation. What is going on there when it comes to HPA and some of your interests?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think the when we look at the broader opportunities within the supply chain, one of the areas we've certainly been very excited about has been innovations and opportunities that have occurred that are occurring within warehousing. And a large portion of this kind of enthusiasm came from one of our early investments many years ago of a company called ShipBob, which has really become an industry leader in the e-commerce warehouse fulfillment side of things. And one of the exciting things that they were able to prove out and see is just the scale of what e-commerce has become. When they got started, was still an unknown. It was a question of if that would even become, if it's a trend or if it's just a flash moment.
Yeah, and it's grew a lot during COVID, and everyone's, oh, at this growth, we're going to move everything. There's no longer going to be retail. And then it obviously slowed down after COVID when we could leave the house, but still there, still an important part. It's not an experiment anymore.
It certainly is not. And I think specifically when we think about kind of opportunities within warehouse automation, I think the good thing that has occurred with some of the stresses on the supply chain as a result of COVID and a variety of other kind of elements from a broader kind of world perspective is it's really showcasing that kind of automation is really no longer optional. And so when we look at the various kind of deep labor shortages, seeing to ShipBob's point, just the incredible continued e-commerce demand that just continues to grow, as well as what customers are expecting, all of those pieces really are forcing warehouses to take action and take action sooner. On the labor shortage side of things, I know we talked a little bit about my dad on the manufacturing side of things. He's getting ready for retirement in the next year or two. And companies like his, even though they're a very well established manufacturing plant in Chicago, don't have clarity of where the next generation of folks like my dad are going to come from. And so labor shortages certainly are also creating that pressure for the need for automation. And one of the things that we think about at the early stage of investing when we do it is what is the behavior change that is necessary? Because there are so many problems that have not been solved through technology. And one of the reasons behind that is just from a pure value proposition perspective, that there's not been enough value or not been even enough pain for people to make that shift. But I think with all of those different part components like labor shortages and the e-commerce demand and all the challenges that comes with customer expectations, it's finally pushed the need for warehouses to identify and understand that automation is going to be a necessary part to their future.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm an automotive guy originally, so I spent a lot of time in product development engineering. But I would also go to the plants because that's where we're building them. And a long time ago, when I started my career, when you went to an assembly plant, the work was really difficult. There was a lot of crouching. You can't crouch for your job for more than a week without it starting to have an impact. And by the way, it was generations after the automotive started. But back in the day, if you worked in an auto plant, at the end of the day, you'd be tired, you'd be sweaty, you'd be dirty, and you might be hurt. And if you're not hurt from hitting your finger on something, you're getting long-term hurt that from crouching all day or from lifting things that are too heavy. So if you go into a plant now, you will not see people at the end of the day getting tired. You're on your feet perhaps, but they've got that job to the place where people are not getting hurt. They're not going home and having to shower. They are not filthy dirty. They're not sweaty. It's a very different job. And it's a job that you can do for 30 years. And I think that we also started recognizing that we have to take good care of these people or they're not going to stay. When we have a labor shortage, that means nobody's going to go in to a job that is exhausting and mind numbing and do it for any more than the minimum amount of time. Warehouses are going to follow that same trajectory. Someday you're going to say, oh, working in a warehouse is a good job because it's virtually all automated and all you're doing is you're a robotics engineer or whatever the job is. We got to get the manual nature of it. It can't be backbreaking. It can't be I walk 10 miles a day. It sounds healthy, but it's not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And tying it back to the caddying thing, one of the funny tropes of Evan scholars is that caddies have the longest walk to college because how many years we caddied. I think I did about 400 loops before going to college.
That is not easy work. And it's gone away. Carts took over. And a lot of times then when I first started caddying, they didn't even want to allow carts on some places, which made the caddies happy. So we have more loops.
Yeah. On the warehousing side of things and manufacturing side of things, completely agree with you. And I think what we're really seeing when it comes from early innovation in the warehousing category, we're seeing that kind of human automation, specifically from a collaboration perspective, is really critical. And through that, what we're really seeing are hybrid workflows. And so what you're seeing is how do you leverage the right robotic and automation solutions alongside individuals so that, to your point, like the specific elements that are too demanding or too repetitive for an individual can be managed through automation, and then other parts to it are going to be critical in terms of enabling the workers to be able to provide the most value.
Yep. I was at Manifest this year and I interviewed the guys from Ryder Ventures. They make some investments. And one of the things they're talking about is humanoid robots, right? And when you say robots, that's interesting, but humanoid robots, that just sounds really cool. But they said we're getting to a place where the cost of robots keeps coming down. And if you say, hey, this robot can replace Mike and it costs $55,000, that's a slam dunk. I'm buying it. As soon as the cost comes down to a certain place and you say, well, this job is no longer a human job because we can buy robots for a price that makes it cost effective. And again, I don't think any of us say, oh, that's a great job. I can't wait to go get a job in a warehouse. A couple hundred years ago, people were happy to do that work. I always think I have my mom's family's from the coal mining town in Pennsylvania. And she said it was such a huge upgrade to move to Detroit and work in factories. Oh my God. First off, it pays 5 times more and nobody dies. Like Nobody gets black lung, nobody falls down a hole. And they were happy to do those jobs. Not their grandchildren, not so much.
Yeah, no, there certainly are expectations in terms of what is being offered and what the work actually is. And that's where it's exciting because that's where kind of the innovation and the types of companies that we're looking to invest in are going to enable and meet where the workforce is today. One of our other investments is a company called Digit Software, and they're really providing kind of an enterprise resource planning solution for the manufacturing sector, really focused around kind of inventory management, purchase optimization, and when you look at what they're offering and how they're trying to enable the manufacturing sectors that they work within, it really creates that streamlined operations where people are getting outside of Excel or people are getting outside of using very expensive and extensive implementations of large software systems to really be able to provide a focus of that operation so that you're not spending exorbitant amount of time on basic things that are prone to error and can get back to focusing on really being optimized within a manufacturing and warehouse setting.
Yep. I want to talk about a few other things, newer tech that I've seen. My friend Sandkulp over at Gather AI, they have drones that do the inventory. So it just flies by and it's a camera and it's looking for discrepancy. So if it knows that this box is supposed to look exactly this way and it looks and says, hey, that box isn't there, or that box looks opened, or is there it takes a picture, and then when you come in the morning, you're able to go, okay, I'm going to go look at these 25 discrepancies to see what's going on, as opposed to asking humans to climb to the top of a warehouse, which is dangerous. And also, they're just not as good at it. This is something that the drones are really good at. And it's not something we're particularly good at. And there's another company I talked to the guys over at Flymingo, and they've taken cameras and connected it to the WMS so they can see what so they would call regular cameras dumb cameras. If you can tie the pick and packs to a time and you say that got picked at 2:57 and we have a picture of Michael taking it out of the bin and putting it on the cart, now you all of a sudden have the ability to become your industrial engineer can manage 20 plants across the world rather than getting on a plane and flying around. I think these technologies are fantastic, and it's going to make life in these warehouses, they're going to make them more efficient, but it's going to make life a lot better because we got to somehow manage these with fewer people because we just don't have the population at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of exciting opportunities at looking at real time orchestration and thinking through like how do you predict tasks and how do you create some simulations to really understand what is the workforce going to do today and what are the kind of key areas. And it's being enabled through solutions like that and others.
Yep. And so you guys are very interested in opportunities in that space. Next, I want to talk about cold chain. And cold chain is increasingly important. It might seem like yesterday's news, but everybody who has food is seeming to move back out of processed stuff. So you say, oh, yeah, we used to get these noodles that they're freeze dried and then we're going to add water. I think more and more people are saying, no, can we make this fresher? Dog food's a perfect example. Dog food used to just come in cans or in boxes. Now all the premium dog food and cat food is fresh. That means cold chain. And we know it's healthier. And it also means it's perishable, which means we have to be better at the inventory. But these are trends that I think we're all pretty comfortable with. We all know I should eat more fruit and vegetables. I should eat more fresh food. I've got to get away from processed crap that I prefer. And the processed crap does not need an exacting cold chain typically. The healthier food that we're all trying to eat needs a good cold chain.
Absolutely. And I think as we think about the cold chain and just it's been great to see the focus across the industry around how to optimize and provide value within that. I know we briefly talked about Manifest, which is also one of my favorite kind of logistics conferences. And they had an entire half day dedicated to cold chain and some of their keynotes were focused on the cold chain.
It was their big focus this year was cold chain.
Absolutely. And for us, as we think about what are the opportunities and challenges in the space, it even progresses beyond food. So even now within the pharmaceutical sector, there's kind of movement both to get the right kind of equipment to you as a patient, but also in terms of like from a reverse logistics perspective, instead of you going to a doctor's office in order to get blood drawn or in order to have certain specimens provided, there's a reverse cold chain component to it as well to really make the patient experience that much better. And across those different pieces, that introduces new challenges. And so for us, one of the investments that we made recently is a company called Paccurate, which really has created kind of an excellent kind of parcel packing intelligence platform that's applicable across multiple industries and use cases. If you think about from a basic perspective, anytime you've ordered something on Amazon and it's a little item and it comes in a box that is much larger in size, that's a break in the supply chain. You just had that box filling up so much space in the truck, so much space that the truck driver had to drive it around, only for you to get this little item. And so, what Packard's doing is really being able to provide more intelligence around those decisions, both in terms of basic component of what packaging do you need, but also thinking about when you're actually sending out that particular shipment. And as it applies to the cold chain, that becomes even more critical because when you think about the use cases within the cold chain, if I'm buying here in our hometown of Chicago, there's a number of large pizza joints that will freeze ship deep dish pizza. If you're paying $20, $30 for a pizza, but have to spend $50 to actually ship it, that completely changes the economics and thought processes for you. And so what Packard's been able to unlock has been that smarter decisioning around it. And one of the things that we reflected on prior to making the investment was really thinking about when it comes to the opportunities within the cold chain, perishable shipping within the e-commerce sector specifically has a very kind of narrowed focus of where it makes sense. And so if you think about what is the value and the price of a product as well as what is the weight, those two become really important axes to determine if a product like that can even be shipped. And then if it can be shipped, really having the right optimal decisions around it. And so healthcare becomes a very interesting kind of use case or need within cold chain solutions because you have items and products that are usually lighter, so they don't weigh as much, but are incredibly valuable. And then the reverse can be true sometimes for certain e commerce products where cold brew coffee is just way too heavy to ship. I'm not going to spend $8 on the cold brew, $30 on the shipping.
Yeah, yeah. I told you before we hit the record button. A few years ago, there was a woman. She was like actually a supermodel. She was on the Sports Illustrated stuff. So she has some sort of vegan ice cream or something, and she wanted to be able to ship it via e-commerce. And I told her it's going to be really a challenge because what you have to do, and I think Haagen-Dazs does this, is you sell like 5 at a time. You can't just buy one because the cost of the dry ice or the whatever you're doing to cool it could be regular ice. I don't know how you're ever going to keep it cold. Sometimes it's cold packs, whatever it is, it's expensive. And I don't want to buy $30 worth of ice cream and $80 worth of packaging. And there's another aspect. So what they typically do is they raise the price of the product. So you go, oh, the packaging only costs $30. The ice cream costs 80. I think also there's another aspect that we forget here, which is how much space that takes. So what we're all trying to do is put more into a truck, whether it's a final mile truck or an over the road truck. And cold chain is really big and bulky. So if we can get smarter packaging, like the guys at Packard are doing, and get smarter packaging and smaller, tighter packages, that is good for the environment. It's good for e-commerce. And again, I think there is a lot more of the medical world that stuff needs to be chilled. Usually it's temperature controlled. It's not frozen, obviously, but it's colder. I think also the Food Safety Modernization Act really raised the bar on this. And I'm thinking that's President Obama was the president when we got that. But it, for the first time, started raising the bar within the logistics and transportation space. And I did a whole bunch of webinars on it. And I always remember there's people who would reach out to me and say, I don't answer to the FDA. I was like, you do now, dude. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just teaching the class.
Yeah, no, regulations has certainly played an important role in all the different decisions within the supply chain. And we've seen that across many of our companies.
I think also, I seem to remember this, the guy from Chicago, and They were selling some sort of meats. And I remember them calling and they said, we have to monitor the temperature at of the actual product, not of the truck. And so I think we're looking for a lot more specific tracking. I want to know where my pallet is. And you say, oh, it's in that truck. Is it? Are you sure it's not back at the warehouse? So I think we're going to start tracking. And anytime I say tracking, it becomes temperature control, humidity control, all of the other things that we can, all the other context you can give me on my shipment. Not so long ago, I interviewed my friend Dan Hendricks from Bloodhound Tracking, and he was talking about that they can monitor a container to tell you if there's fentanyl in that container or if there's humans in that container. And I keep thinking, as soon as that becomes widely available, it's going to become regulatory. I can almost, if it doesn't become a regulation, I can see the best brands saying we require this of our suppliers.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I think on the tracking and visibility front, it obviously has grown tremendously over the years. We're investors in a company called Fourkites that really has defined
They're one of the innovators.
they are, yeah, and really providing increased visibility. And now that's has become an established. It's the next layer of how do you provide intelligence on top of that visibility.
Yeah, as soon as you say I can tell you where it's at, the next thing is what else can you do?
Exactly. It's a great question.
And I think the visibility tools, this is somewhat my thought on it, is when they first came out with all the visibility tools, people would say, "Oh, I can tell you, I give you visibility from end to end," and I go from where to where, and it was typically like from the time I pick it up at your factory in Philadelphia to the time we deliver it to Indiana. You're like, that's just the last 2 days. That supply chain is 18 weeks long, and I think we want visibility the entire time. And any dead spot we notice now. So for the while, we found out the ports were a little bit of a dead spot during COVID, or our stuff was just, I can track it, it's just not moving. I think we now want more data points. So I want to know that visibility almost in a flow where you can say, I don't want you to tell me where it's at 1 o'clock and at 2 o'clock. I just want, anytime I ask, I want to know exactly where it's at. The bar's just getting higher and higher for that. But that data is valuable.
100%. Yeah. And yeah, the expectations grow and the point to point components grow. And that plays out in a variety of other parts as well. On the agricultural side of things, understanding what is the status of the tomato before it's boxed, before it gets on the truck, all those sort of things that visibility is becoming very critical.
Michael, I was at the grocery store, this is probably like a decade ago, and I was with one of my daughters. And granted, my daughters are exceptionally smart. But when we were there, she was taking her phone camera over these blueberries or blackberries and just saying, I go, what are you doing? She goes, I'm trying to see, why won't it scan? I go, because that scan's not for you. And she goes, I should be able to scan this and see where it was grown and when it came out of the ground. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I was thinking, I go, you're right, but we don't have that yet. But as soon as it's possible, you start to ask the question, why don't I have that? When you buy blackberries, I like blackberries. You buy them, you have to eat them in the car before you go home because they're going to go bad before you get to your house.
Yeah. And to your point, I think there is a lot of kind of exciting innovations when it comes to providing a deeper perspective of where does your food come from and does it align with your health needs. We're actually investors in a company called Sifter that's focused on providing a deeper insight to what you're purchasing and better understanding how does that align with your health goals.
Yeah. And by the way, I think also, is it ethical, right? I think people are increasingly looking for fair trade. They want to make sure you're treating your workers right. We want to make sure this is a product that feel happy to support, a company we're happy to work with. I remember one of my two daughters, one of my other daughters says, oh, those peel and eat shrimp, somebody else, those peeled shrimp, who peeled it? And because from what I understand, there was some countries that were like forcing people to peel shrimp. And I was like, oh God, can I enjoy anything?
Yeah, but it's great. I think the next generation of consumers have a lot of expectations
Bar
and
is high.
yeah, and just had a 5-month-old son, and as I
He's
think
not
about
picky yet.
he's not picky yet, but I think as you think about the next generation of kids, you want them to all those challenges and all those kind of innovations that have occurred within the supply chain to make sure that food and products are healthy, to make sure that there's kind of optimization and thoroughness in terms of just even how something got delivered to you becomes really important from a consumer and environmental and all of the above perspective.
Yes, since the beginning of time, we've been in this war to see who could get the calories, right? And we won over here in the United States and the West in general. And now we got too many calories. But I think your parents and great grandparents, they didn't worry about the nutrition. They worried about calories. Can I give my kids enough calories to live? And now everybody's much more focused on nutrition. I heard Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, talking about this not so long ago. He said, no one said nutrition when I was a kid. It was not a thing we
Yeah,
cared
yeah.
about.
It's we're moving up the Maslow hierarchy of needs for sure.
Exactly. Anyway, let's also talk about CPG. I want to set the stage for just a second. So, a few weeks ago, I did a podcast about the consumer packaged goods. So, that's the companies like Unilever, Kraft Heinz, Nestle, and they typically are portfolios of brands now. You guys are a portfolio of companies, they're a portfolio of brands, and they're constantly tending those. So, they say, oh, this brand's a little old. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to replace it with some new organic brand that we just bought. And what we're tending to see now is the brands are getting a little healthier. They're getting rid of the unhealthy stuff out of there, selling it off to somebody who's comfortable with the unhealthy. But they're always making adjustments. So some of the stuff that's happened in recent years is we found out that the next generation isn't drinking alcohol to the same. They're not having as many children, but they are spending a lot more on pet food, the premium pet food. So all these brands are tweaking. So not so long ago, there was somebody who said, I wish we had not bought that baby food brand, but bought the pet food. And again, it's the different focus is there. So those companies are always changing. And some of the big challenges they're facing is their costs have gone up way too fast to suit the retailers. So the retailers are pressuring them to lower their price. And also, they're bumping up against these private labels. So the private labels, we were talking before we hit the record button about Kirkland brand. If you go to Walmart, you don't think, or Walmart, if you go over to Costco, you don't think of Kirkland as an inexpensive brand. It is less expensive, but it's great. We have no issues with it. And I think, what's the name of the Trader Joe's? 70-80% of their stuff is private label. You go to Aldi, a lot of private label. So I think these CPGs are all looking and saying, what do we do? And I think a lot of them are kind of moving towards a premium or organic, but they have to be really concerned with how do we compete and be successful in this market?
Yeah, absolutely. There certainly has been a lot of changes within the CPG landscape over the last 10 years. One of our early investments was in a company called Simple Mills that's been in the news in the last kind of month or two because they just got acquired for about $800 million by the company.
Nice.
Yeah, and what was amazing about the company and the team there is they really defined the better for you category. And at the time that they got started, there wasn't that much innovation and there wasn't even that much focus necessarily around some of those better for you type items. And they've been able to grow and really build up an incredible consumer base that really trusts
What do
what they
they
have.
make?
Yeah, so it's a variety of different things on the kind of cracker side, baking goods side. It's all really focused on almond flour being the core.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've used almond flour to make some strudel thing because it's healthier.
Yeah, and they were able to find the perfect balance of it being healthier, but still incredibly tasty, and it can be enjoyed
Yeah.
by all.
Yeah. You can't tell the difference.
Yeah, if it's well done. But I think the interesting thing to your point, as the ecosystem has continued to evolve, brands like theirs did an amazing job of really setting being accepted by consumers because of the trust that they were able to build. And with what's interesting as the product labels have continued to grow and develop, is some of them are doing a really good job as well of creating that trust. And to your point, Kirkland or each of these brands now, or each of these groups have it, are really building up some of that trust now that they've been in market for many years. And the part that we find that's interesting is some of these white label or some of these kind of internal brands are doing a good job of finding kind of white space in the market. So identifying, all right, so we're not going to create necessarily a competitor to the Simple Mills because that's an established and well appreciated brand. But what are other areas that have not had the innovation that we've been looking for? And so being able to establish some pieces there. But those kind of internally developed solutions is going to be fascinating to see because to your point, I think there's going to be more and more grocery chains that are almost exclusively within that private label.
Yeah, and those private labels, when I was a kid, they would just look generic. It just say on the side beans, and you go, oh, I don't know. Like that doesn't feel good to just buy beans. But now you're like, I don't know, you also always hear, oh, beans all come out of the same factory. It's different labels. And I think a lot of consumers right now, you go to the grocery store, it feels like you're paying twice as much as you did not so long ago. Everyone's looking for a way to get a little discount. And if you're buying some private label, why not? I think also any new brand, you have to fight for shelf space. If it's a private label, and if you're saying, hey, we're Kroger and we have some private labels that we own, we don't have to debate whether we get shelf space.
Yeah, it is true. It is interesting though when you get to the dynamics of how grocery chains make decisions before kind of private label when you look at like the cereal aisle. One of the things that those cereal brands had done is they actually bought up or created it for every category so that whether it was if you're looking for a sweet cereal or if you're looking for a healthy cereal, they would have something in every one of those categories and it was all under the same brand so that it didn't matter what your choice was, they would still make money on you.
Yeah, I always remember I grew up in an era where having cereal in the morning was like the right thing to do. It was like the healthy thing to do. And you're like, oh, I'm eating whatever it is. And even the healthier cereals had a lot of sugar in it. And I'm sure you're, as a new parent, you're not looking going, oh, I can't wait till I can start feeding my kid a whole bunch of sugar.
Oh yeah, no, that's for sure. It's all going to be purees made by the Polish grandmothers.
There you go. I want to talk now about what you guys are looking for. So, not only what kind of areas you're looking to invest in, but also what are you looking for in partners?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you asking that. On our end, as I mentioned before, so as investors at the seed and Series A category, we're really looking to support the next generation of founders and support the next set of innovation. And the thing for us that we've been really excited to see has been seeing as, especially within the logistics ecosystem, as that tech space has evolved over the last 10 years, we're seeing people who are VPs and building up businesses in either adjacent markets or in some of the larger tech players leaving now to start their own businesses. And that has been really exciting, both kind of across specifically the supply chain, and then even here in our hometown of Chicago, where people have been able to get experiences from incredible businesses and now being able to leverage that and think about what problem do I really want to solve. And so for us, we've been very excited to kind of partner with folks that kind of come from that background and really understand the pain point of their customer base and understand the nuances of it. I think there's a lot of different aspects that are complex in the supply chain, some of which you covered today. And so you really have to have a nuanced view and understanding before you can try to innovate within a particular industry and space. And so for us, we've been very excited to meet with and engage and find founders that are looking and thinking about what is going to happen in the supply chain in the next 10 years. And whether that's innovation on the agricultural side of the supply chain and how does that going to play together, or thinking through when you look at the drivers and all the operations that comes within providing a product to our front door, do those drivers and do those ops managers really have all the tools that they need to make themselves best optimized? And then thinking as well as these new innovations have come into market, like the Forkites of the world and others, what's the next set of challenges that are opportunities that kind of come about now that you have visibility? Now you have other questions. There's other things you want to ask about. And so now that I've been in the venture space for as many years as I've had, it's fun to see the next. We had one set of perspectives, and a lot of those companies have really built incredible businesses. And now it's all right. Now the market has improved. The world has gotten better across those categories because of those businesses. What's the next step above that?
Yep. Yep. So are you seeing this trend? I'm wrong way to ask. I'll start that over again. Are you more likely to invest in a founding team rather than an individual? Is that something that you're seeing in the space?
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's been so much research that's done in the venture and early stage space to try to figure out what is the right formula for success. And I think we've seen it across the board from solo founders to strong teams. But it really comes down to whoever's the CEO or whoever the co-founders, who are they putting around themselves to augment areas that they need support in. And so whoever the even the best founders and all of those that you see on the front page of various news outlets, like they have limitations as well. And so really we certainly do think about what is the right team makeup support for a company. And that's also where, given kind of our people first approach, trying to bring our experts to the table to help provide and augment some of that those areas that the founders need help in.
Yep. So you guys have made a lot of investments. You've been there 12 years. How often are you seeing these companies pivot from their original idea? Is that like 10%, 50%? What are you seeing in that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when we make an investment, we try to go in with an understanding of, especially at the early stages that we get involved with, is what are the changes that are going to happen. And a lot of times we anticipate there may be some changes in terms of their go to market strategy, changes obviously in terms of the product. But we certainly have seen both in terms of companies being very successful that started out from the where they thought they were going to build to where they are now. And then other ones that were right on the category or right on the industry, but needed to really pivot, evolve the business model to be able to provide the right solution. But I think from our lens, the real focus and the points that we're getting excited to invest in is that the core problem you're trying to solve is well defined. And I'd say pivots across the board, we're seeing it, but in our own portfolio, a lot of times that kind of bigger vision continues to hold true. And so whether it's Simple Mills providing a better for you product, whether it's Forkites providing increased visibility into your supply chain, or ShipBob really enabling e-commerce brands to have incredible logistics to provide what the customers are expecting. That's been at the core of their perspectives at the point that we
Right.
invested.
So these are small pivots, is what these are. The vision and the mission stayed the same, but execution might be changed a little bit.
Absolutely.
I just listened to the book, The Founders. It was about the founding of PayPal. And if you look at who founded PayPal, I think there's 6 billionaires from the founders.
Yeah. It's called the PayPal Mafia.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. The author of the book said none of those guys particularly liked the term PayPal Mafia because they said it just didn't feel right for them, but everyone knows them by that. But what's interesting is the pivots that they had to take just because they had this idea that it was all based on Palm Pilots. Hey, if you have a Palm Pilot and I have a Palm Pilot, I should be able to shift money between me and you. Just the problem is not enough people had Palm Pilots. So that, but anyway, it was very interesting to listen to some of the smartest guys in the world were at that. I think the founders, for Elon Musk is one of the guys. So he's founded Tesla and SpaceX. And then there was the founder of Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn, the guys who founded YouTube, the guys who founded Yelp. So these guys were all.
Oh, it's incredible. It's incredible. Yeah.
And to see that they did not know exactly what to do when they started was very interesting. Anyway.
It is very hard, obviously, to predict the future. And that's even the reason why venture models have baked into their business model having room for failure, because at the earliest days, you don't know. And if you're as an investor or as a founder, if you're too scared to take that kind of leap, then all the innovations and things that we've talked about would have never occurred.
They didn't deviate from we want to make it easier to transfer money between people. And so it just kept changing slightly. And they're a Fortune 500 company. So anyway, enough of my blather. I'm going to summarize, and then I want to get your final thoughts on the topic. So I'm talking to my friend Michael Sahi, and he doesn't spell it Sahi.
Sahai, yes.
Sahi, and it's Sachaj. Anyway, we're talking about people first approach to funding the future of logistics. And you guys are seed and Series A, very much early investors. And you've made some very successful investments in Better Trucks, Forkites, ShipBob, Packurate. We talked also about Digit Software and what was that? Good Mills? What was that?
Simple Mills.
Simple Mills. Okay. We talked a lot about warehouse automation, how that's so important that we get the warehouse stuff right because we just have so many challenges in staffing and being successful in that space. We also talked about cold chain. Cold chain is still growing, and I don't see it slowing down. A lot more stuff needs to be chilled food wise, but also we're seeing a lot of the pharmaceutical and a lot of the like vaccine stuff like that are always going to be need to be chilled. And then we talked about CPG in general. You guys have some investments there, and really comes back to the right idea, but also got to get really good at the operations because cost is such a big deal right now in CPG. Anyway, we also talked about what you guys are looking for in a founder or a founding team, as there so often are, because it's got to be that right fit. Anyway, enough of my blather. Final thoughts on the topic, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate, Joe, you bringing us together today. And I think we're just very excited about what's been going on in the broader supply chain sector from an innovation perspective. And it's been great to see the community continue to develop and grow through great conferences like Manifest and through great podcasts like yourself. I think it's been fantastic to see the community coming together and trying to help one another through insights, through connections. And so for us, that kind of continues to build out that people first approach, both within our own organization as well as the community at large. And thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always great to hear the VC perspective. You guys have a different view than we have. Most of us are working day to day in one company. You guys are working day to day in dozens of companies, and you're also really looking to see what's next, where we all are supposed to be doing that, but we're so busy doing what we're supposed to do today that we don't always get a chance to look to the future. I love what you guys are doing. I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, a link to your website, and any of the links you and your go-to-market team give me. I'll put those in the show notes so people can reach out and talk to you.
Amazing. I really appreciate it.
What conferences we see you and the fine folks from HPA at?
Yeah. So in addition to Manifest, we actually just brought the investor and startup community together at ProMat, which is to the warehousing component that we talked about here in Chicago. And I think those are two of our kind of favorite conferences when it comes to startup and innovation. And especially when it comes to ProMat, always are very excited that people want to come to our hometown of Chicago. And so we try to be especially welcoming and creating kind of opportunities to create community.
Love it. I love it. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe.
And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.